Hello, I'm Nari McDiarmid for Australia's Mining Monthly, and I'd like to welcome Matt Sprague, Associate Director with leading climate company South Pole. So Matt, what are some of the first steps that mining companies should take?
So really monitoring and understanding their impacts is a really important first step. So not just from a greenhouse gas perspective, also around their biodiversity impacts, their water and their waste footprints as well is really important, because then they can put plans into place to start reducing those impacts. So not just around their operational side on the mine or their offices, it's looking at the entire value chain from their supply partners through the mining operations and also downstream to the final production and smelting of the products that they sell into the market.
Matt, can you tell me about the safeguard mechanism and how that could impact the mining sector?
So the safeguard mechanism is a really important policy that the Australian government currently has, and it's been around for a long time. But it's the first time that we've seen a ratchet mechanism actually included in it, where mining companies will need to start decarbonising at around 5% a year to closely align to science. So this is going to impact their Scope 1 emissions, so their on-mine fuel and diesel consumption. And the most important thing here and the most interesting thing here is how it has a trickle-on effect throughout the economy. So as part of the safeguard mechanism, the Australian government's put a $75 charge on carbon emissions. And so from a carbon project developer and a carbon advisory perspective, putting a price on carbon is a really important first step for mining companies to now value their emissions and try and put actions into place to reduce those impacts. And how we see that trickle through the economy will be far more impactful than the 200 or so sites that are covered by this mechanism.
So speaking of policies and the trickle-down effect, if we take a look at the International Sustainability Standards Board, what could the implementation of those standards mean for miners here in Australia?
So they could have a huge impact on the reporting requirements of mining companies. So what we're seeing globally is a move from voluntary carbon accounting and voluntary carbon and climate action to more mandatory reporting and mandatory action. So we're seeing policies in Europe through the CSRD program. We're seeing ISSB globally as well. And if the Australian government does decide to make it mandatory, it's going to be really pivotal for the larger companies across Australia to start understanding their climate impacts and putting plans into place to actually reduce those emissions. So the ISSB standards S1 and S2 have mandatory requirements around disclosure, understanding the climate risk and disclosing areas of climate risk, and also impacts and strategies to reduce emissions. So that's going to be much more broader than just the mining sector, but obviously as a large emitter and a carbon intensive sector, it will capture pretty much all of the operational and some of the exploratory mining companies in the market as well.
Well, as you mentioned, Matt, mining's traditionally a very carbon-intensive sector. So how can mining play a role in the shift towards net zero?
Mining has an absolutely critical role in the global shift to net zero. So we can't develop our energy transition without a lot of the critical minerals that go into wind turbines, transmission lines, solar panels, you name it, batteries, all rely on the mining sector. So we need mining to step up and develop those critical minerals in a low carbon way, but they are absolutely fundamental. So we need the whole value chain, the whole supply chain to look at decarbonisation. If you look at iron ore companies, the majority of their emissions sit in the smelting and the processing of the iron ore, which is typically overseas. So we need to look at holistic approaches to decarbonising the entire sector, not just individual mine sites. So it's going to take a lot of work, cross-collaborative work, looking at new technologies, looking at new business models and new approaches to solving this very large challenge.
And lastly, Matt, what are you finding most valuable here at Future of Mining Perth?
So I'm really looking forward to a lot of the talks tomorrow on sustainability and ESG and how that's going to impact the mining sector. But really the value is meeting people that are on the mine site and understanding the problems and challenges that they face on a day-to-day basis and how that's going to limit their ability to take climate action. So climate action is absolutely critical that they take, but sometimes it gets put off because there's an emergency today, or there's business critical decisions that need to be made today, and sometimes sustainability can wait. And it's understanding how, as an advisor and as a consultant, we can make those climate and those sustainability decisions part of business critical. So running the mine today involves looking at decarbonisation. It involves looking at climate risk, and it's not an add-on, and it's not something that we can put off till later. So for me, it's learning how mines operate a little bit more granularity. The size of some of these mine sites is just mega, and that introduces its own challenges and complexities. So I'm learning so much.
Well, thank you very much for your time today.